What the Bradley family thought was going to be the holiday of a lifetime quickly turned into a trip from hell. What caused the disappearance of Amy Lynn Bradley? Born in Petersburg, Virginia on May 12, 1974, Amy Lynn Bradley was the daughter of parents Ron and Iva, who lived together with her younger brother Brad in Chesterfield County, Virginia. Amy was described as an all-American girl, pretty, outgoing, and athletic. Amy attended local Longwood University after getting a scholarship in basketball, graduating with a degree in physical education. Amy was just about to start a new job at a computer consulting firm and had just started renting a new apartment, all whilst beginning her master's in sports psychology. When Amy was 23 years old, she, her brother, and her parents packed their bags and left Chesterfield, Virginia, heading for a week-long Caribbean cruise aboard the Rhapsody of the Seas, a luxury cruise ship operated by Royal Caribbean that had taken its maiden voyage just 2 years prior. The ship held up to 2,500 passengers and was described as Vision Class. The family trip was given to Ron by his boss at Illinois Mutual Life Insurance as a reward for his performance. Initially, Amy was reluctant to go, although she was a strong swimmer. Having worked as a lifeguard whilst at college, she was deathly afraid of open water. According to Iva Bradley, the family had to persuade Amy quite a bit to even join them on the cruise. Eventually, she relented and the family set off from Puerto Rico on the 21st of March, 1998. From the moment the family boarded, Amy got a lot of attention from fellow passengers and crew members. According to her parents and her brother, Brad, she seemed to have especially caught the attention of some waiters, Eduardo, Patrick, and David. One of the waiters had his sights set on her, asking Ron for Amy's name. They said that they wanted to take her to Carlos and Charlie's restaurant while the boat was docked in Aruba. Chillingly, this restaurant is also the last place that Natalie Holloway was last seen alive, but that's a case for another time. 3 days after they set off, the Rhapsody of the Seas was docked just off the shore of Curaçao, an island of the Netherlands Antilles. The Bradleys were enjoying a black tie event on board the ship along with other guests. Amy and Brad had some photos taken by the ship's photographer on the stairwell to commemorate the night and the trip. While the siblings were taking pictures, a waiter went up to Iva asking if he and some other staff members could have her permission to take Amy out to another bar over on the mainland. Iva thought this was weird and told Amy what the waiter had said, with Amy also finding it strange, agreeing to stay on the boat with her family, saying, "I wouldn't go and do anything with any of them. They give me the creeps." Later on, Amy and Iva went to the photo gallery to look at their images and strangely found that all the pictures of Amy were missing, even though the manager remembers developing them. Amy's mother asked for them to be redeveloped and shrugged it off as a strange anomaly. After the Bradleys had finished with their event at around 1 a.m., Amy and Brad went upstairs to the ship's club, while Ron and Iva went to bed wishing their children good night. The pair stayed up dancing to the cruise ship band Blue Orchid. Amy was seen chatting with a few of the band members and danced with the bass player, Yellow, aka Alistair Douglas, which was captured on video. The boat's computerized door system shows that Brad returned to their suite at 3:35 a.m., with Amy joining him less than 15 minutes later. The two stayed out on the balcony for a while before Brad went off to sleep. Ron said he had woken up when she came in, and Amy told him she said she hadn't been feeling too well because of the motion of the boat since we left Aruba that evening. So she said she was going to just stay out there and get some fresh air. Brad last saw his sister sitting out there on a lounge chair at around 4 a.m. Between 5:15 and 5:30 a.m., Ron woke up and saw that Amy was still sitting on the balcony. I could see Amy's legs from her hips down. She looks like she was resting comfortably. I dozed back off to sleep. The balcony door was closed because it hadn't been closed. I would have gotten up and closed it. Relaxed knowing both his children were safe in the cabin, Ron went back to sleep. However, when he went to check on her again at around 6 a.m., Amy was gone, along with her cigarettes and lighter. Ron was initially more confused than worried, thinking Amy may have just gone to stretch her legs or watch the sunrise as she intended to come back to the cabin, having left her shoes and ID. Ron headed to the main deck to search for his daughter, but after an hour of looking, he became increasingly worried. Brad joined in with his father's search and mentioned that he thought he remembered Amy talking about going to the mainland to buy more cigarettes. The ship was already docked and the crew were preparing to lower the gangplanks for the day's excursion. Over 2 hours after she had last been seen, the ship's captain authorized a call out over the tannoy for Amy to go to the service deck. The Bradleys have criticized Royal Caribbean for their initial reluctance to help with the search for Amy, saying that the crew resisted the tannoy announcement for some time after it was requested, claiming it was too early in the morning and they didn't want to disturb other guests. At the time the announcement was made, guests were already disembarking. Iva pleaded with the crew, "You need to lock the ship up. You need to back the ship off of the dock. Don't let anybody off this boat. Somebody's got my daughter." By the time the announcement was made, just after 7:50 a.m., most of the passengers had already got off the ship, with Iva later saying, "I became more and more frantic because I knew that if she was in a position to hear the announcement, she would come immediately to us. And then I had thoughts that maybe somebody had her in a room and she heard it and couldn't get to us." Finally, the captain ordered a search. Royal Caribbean officials would claim they searched through all 10 decks, all 999 rooms. Iva Bradley was convinced that her daughter's disappearance had something to do with the attention she had been receiving throughout the stay, and especially the previous evening. The ship's band's bass player, Alistair Douglas, approached Brad whilst they were looking for Amy and told him he felt bad about what had happened to his sister. That was an odd thing to say that early in the stages of this thing. You know, nobody knew except for my family and I and security that something may be wrong. At the point of Alistair and Brad's interaction, nobody but the family, security, and the captain were aware that Amy was missing. Alistair Douglas would later deny that this conversation even happened. After almost 12 hours of searching, the crew concluded that Amy was nowhere on the ship. At this point, the Bradleys begged for an official announcement to be made to the other passengers, in the hope they may be able to help them piece together what had happened to Amy that day. The captain refused on the basis that a missing person would worry other passengers. Ship officials told the family that at this point they believed Amy had either gone too close to the rise and fallen overboard or committed suicide. The family vehemently refuted this, citing Amy's deep fear of the sea and the fact she was happy at home and had so much waiting for her back in Virginia that she was excited about. There's no way she would have taken her own life. At this point, with the crew claiming the entire ship had been searched, the Bradleys were given the ultimatum that they could either disembark and continue their search on the mainland or stay on the boat. The Bradleys felt that they had no choice but to leave the ship, effectively making them stranded in Curaçao. The FBI was contacted by the family, who begged them for help in the search for Amy. The FBI told the Bradleys that they needed to reboard the ship at whatever cost, so they flew to St. Thomas to meet the ship again. The FBI made contact with the Rhapsody of the Seas and the Royal Caribbean, and found that unlike what the Bradleys had been told, a full and thorough search of the ship had not been conducted. Only communal areas had been searched, not guest or staff quarters. After this, a 4-day search was undertaken by the Netherlands Antilles Coast Guard to search the waters surrounding where the boat was docked, with the Royal Caribbean also chartering a boat to assist. The search failed to turn up any sign of Amy or inkling as to what happened to her, and the official conclusion was announced that they believed Amy had fallen overboard. But the Bradleys would not accept this. The FBI would also corroborate this, saying they had found no reason why Amy would have wanted to have committed suicide. Her mother said Amy took 15 rolls of film with her to make a collage for her coffee table. While in Aruba, she bought presents for her friends back home and also sent postcards from Puerto Rico to her friends. On one postcard she wrote, "Hey girl, it's gorgeous here. We leave for Aruba tomorrow. Take care. Tell Madison and Niles hello. I'll be home Saturday at 10. See ya, Amy." On another, "Hey, it's beautiful here. Old San Juan has got some amazing buildings. I am taking pictures. Maybe you can see them at Easter. Wish you were here, Amy." Her mother continued to say, on the day before we left for vacation, Amy had adopted a female bulldog, and she was to pick up Daisy when we returned from our cruise. She had just moved into her new apartment and was starting a new job the following Monday. She had so many plans and was so happy about all of them. With the help of investigators, the Bradleys began to piece together Amy's movements the hours before she went missing. Ron knew that she had been on the cabin's balcony at 5:30 a.m. before leaving for some unknown reason after changing her clothes and taking her cigarettes. But this is where the trail began to go cold, until witnesses started to come forward. Crystal Roberts approached them, telling them that she had seen Amy at around 5:45 a.m. with the ship's bassist, Alistair Douglas, going up to another deck together. "I saw Amy and the band member walk over and up to the next deck above us, and about 10 minutes later, he came walking around by himself. No evidence was found to incriminate him, other than the fact that he was the only person aside from her family and security to know that she was missing. Others claimed that they had seen the bass player flirting with Amy the night before. Brad confirmed this, saying, "She said that when they were dancing at the disco, he tried to, dance a little too close, and she had to tell him to back off a little bit." The morning Amy was first reported missing, no one but the Bradleys and ship officials knew. No one, that is, except the bassist. The Bradley family headed back to Caraco to continue their search. Whilst on the mainland, they spoke with a local taxi driver, who told the family that he had seen Amy on the morning of her disappearance. The driver explained that Amy had run over to him whilst people were getting off the boat to ask where the nearest phone was. He described Amy, and her family believed he could have been talking about her. The taxi driver told them a selection of places to search on the island, which later would amount to nothing, but something he did say stuck with them. "I want to tell you that your daughter did not fall from that ship. She's on this island, and I hope you find her." 4 days after the Bradleys had returned to the island, Brad was out searching for his father and Amy's boyfriend when he thought he heard Amy's voice calling for him. It sounded exactly like Amy calling my name, and I've heard it a zillion times. They caught up to the van he thought the voice had come from, but when they approached it quickly realized there was only one person in it. To this day, Brad's not sure whether he followed the wrong van or simply heard what he was so desperately wanting to hear. After following all leads they found in Caraco, the family eventually had to return to the States. But the search did not stop there. The FBI were still exhaustively looking for Amy, not believing the fell overboard theory either. The Bradleys would write to foreign officials, congressmen, and even the White House. They hired private detectives, built a website, and started a 24-hour hotline, all in the hope that one hot lead that would bring their daughter home. In August 1998, a Canadian computer engineer called David Carmichael, who was holidaying in the area with a friend, diving at a beach called Porto Mary, came forward with a promising lead, describing correctly a couple of Amy's tattoos, claiming to have seen her 5 months after her disappearance in Caraco. David claimed he had come face to face with Amy on the beach with her flanked by 2 men, or handlers, as he would later call them. David identified one of the handlers as Alistair Douglas, the ship bassist. They did not immediately report the sighting, however, but waited until they had returned home. The information was quickly reported to the FBI, and the two presented the information to a federal grand jury. David Carmichael said, "I was diving on the island of Burso in August of 1998, and we had just returned from a late afternoon dive in a dive location called Port of Maria. It's a dive location that's set up for divers and for people to go and sort of swim, and they have a small cafe there. We were in process of taking off our dive gear when I noticed 3 people walking up the beach. There was 2 guys and a girl, a white guy, a black guy, and the girl was trailing them. As they passed us, I turned around to my buddy, who was maybe 15 or 20 feet away from me, and I yelled to them and asked him if he had a piece of my dive gear. And just as I did that, they had passed me. This girl spun around, came right back towards me. She had her sunglasses up on her head. She stared right at me, and just as she was about to say something, the black fellow came into my field of vision and motioned her away. Didn't touch her. He motioned her away. She turned around, put her head down, and followed them over to a small cafe area where they sat and ordered drinks. They were actually by the bar, and every once in a while, she was facing outwards towards us, so every once in a while, she would sort of look over towards me and then look back down at the ground. She was sort of resting against a bar stool, sort of looking out towards us. At that point in time, my buddy and I, we went, got a beverage, sat down. Actually quite a ways from us, we couldn't hear what they were talking about, and we left before they did. David continued to testify that he was able to get a good view of Amy from the outdoor bar and could describe her tattoos and the watch she was wearing, which was identified as one gifted to her by her boyfriend. The man with the alleged bassist was described by David as a blonde, ponytail-wearing European type. When asked how certain he was that he had seen Amy, he replied, "I'd put it at 100%. David's account further confirmed the family and the FBI's fears that Amy had been kidnapped, forced off the ship, and was now being held captive on the island. Theories surrounding the sex slave industry and potential human trafficking would further arise and still are thrown around over 23 years later. In autumn 1999, the Bradleys were contacted by Frank Jones, who told them he was a PI. Having previously served in the U.S. Special Forces, he was keen to work with the family to help find Amy. Jones told the family he has the head of a team of ex-Army Rangers and ex-Navy SEALs who would help in his attempt to rescue Amy. Iva Bradley would say, "He told me that he'd put Amy on his own back and swim her out of there." Jones told the family he would send 2 of his ex-forces colleagues to Caraco to speak to an alleged witness, a cook named Judith Margarita. Margarita said that Amy was alive and on the island. She described how she was being held in a housing complex surrounded by armed guards. Margarita assured the family that Amy was well, that she regularly saw her shopping, going to the gym, and leaving the complex. She would describe a man with long blonde hair, similar to the man described by David Carmichael. What solidified it for the Bradleys that this was Amy was not just the accurate description of her tattoos, but Margarita also hummed a tune Iva would sing to her daughter when she was young. This had never been released to the public. In the Bradleys' eyes, this was Amy, and they would go to any lengths to rescue her. The family continued working with Jones, who set up surveillance points at various locations dictated to him by Margarita. Jones reported back to the family regularly and told the family he had seen Amy and witnessed her getting into a green SUV with the same blonde man others had described. Jones warned the family that they had a lot of work to do to secure her release, that she was in a very dangerous situation, and even recounted how he and his men had to leave after being shot at. Over the next few months, Jones would regularly check in with the Bradleys, telling them of more colleagues who had gone to the island and increasingly worrying the family that Amy was in danger of being executed. Desperately, they waited for Jones to signal that they were able to attempt a rescue, and when that time finally came, Jones told them he needed more money. The Bradleys, while desperate for their daughter, remained cautious. They asked Jones for proof that Amy was still alive. Jones sent photographers of Amy sitting on the beach with the blonde-haired man, tattoos and all. Iva would describe, "When I got the pictures, I knew Amy was okay, and it was just a matter of time." Relieved they were on the right track, they sent Jones the money he said he needed. In total, they paid him $210,000, collected through various friends, family, charity, and their own pockets. The Bradleys flew to Florida and waited in a hotel, a private jet given by Ron's boss on standby, ready to finally fly Amy to freedom. "We sat in that hotel for a week, thinking any minute we were going to get a phone call." Iva remembers. Days went by, and the call never came. Down in Caraco, however, a different story was unfolding. One of Jones's men, Tim Buchholz, former Army Special Forces sniper, was assigned to watch the house where Amy was said to be being kept, but he never saw any sign of her. Buchholz discovered that the residents of the house were completely ordinary people, going about their day-to-day lives. Jono Sink, another member of Jones's crew, knew that the pictures provided to the Bradleys of proof that Amy was alive were fake. Sink had posed in a blonde wig alongside a woman Jones knew who was wearing fake tattoos, perfectly placed to fool the Bradleys. After months and thousands of dollars, the game was up. Buchholz contacted the Bradleys, telling them everything. It was revealed that Jones was a complete con, having never even served in the forces. In February 2002, Jones was charged with fraud. Pleading guilty in April 2002, he received just 5 years imprisonment and an order to pay back the money he had stolen. Margarita, who had aided Jones in convincing the family Amy was alive and also profited off their devastation, taking over $8,000. Her son, Giovanni Margarita, said, "It's a lie, it's just using Amy's mother as a way of stealing." Margarita denied her part in the fraud, saying, "Maybe I'm a bad person, but with all my badness, I want Mrs. Bradley really to find her girl." In 1999, a U.S. naval officer reported that he went to a brothel on Caraco and was approached by a young woman. She told him her name was Amy Bradley and asked for his help. However, out of fear of being reprimanded for going into the brothel, the officer did not report this for several months. By the time investigators went to the brothel, it had burned down. In 2005, another promising lead was anonymously emailed to the family. The email had 2 pictures attached of a scantily clad woman who looked a lot like Amy. Upon further investigations, officials found that the pictures came from an escort website offering women in the Caribbean. The woman in the pictures was identified only by Joss. The pictures were shown on the Dr. Phil show, with people also seeing the likeness between the woman and Amy. A forensic detective compared these photos to the photos of Amy from just before she went missing, saying it was her, and he would even bet his career on it. People doubt the image's credibility, though, from claiming it to be photoshopped to pointing out that none of her tattoos are visible. People also note that the hairstyle in the image was not typical of the 2000s. However convincing the images may be when placed side by side, sadly the lead did not go any further. Amy was allegedly sighted on March 1, 2005 in Bridgetown, Barbados. The witness, Judy Mora, claimed she had seen Amy in the bathroom of a department store with 4 handlers. The witness described seeing Amy walking with the 4 men surrounding her. The witness described how they overheard Amy's handlers discussing what sounded like an illegal deal whilst in the bathroom with Amy. The witness spoke to the woman, trying to help her, and said she was told her name was Amy, and that she began to say she was from Virginia but was pulled away by one of her handlers before she could finish. The incident was reported to the FBI, and the witness was able to provide detailed information about Amy's handlers, and the cell phone conversation and a sketch of the handler was added to the FBI's website. The FBI is still investigating the disappearance of Amy Bradley, with new sketches to show what she would look like now. She would be in her late 40s. No charges have ever been filed in the case. Amy was officially declared dead in March 2010, 12 years after she was last seen. So what do you think happened in the case of Amy Bradley? Did she fall overboard or become a victim of something much, much darker?